Recently, the director's cut of some significant releases has become the talk of the town. Every time a new movie by a famous director comes out under a major studio, there are rumors of deleted scenes and significant cuts being made to the film. Fans of the DCEU might remember the significant emotional change when we saw the Batman vs. Superman director's cut when it opened with the death of Jimmy Olsen. That scene changed the entire tone of how Snyder was going to approach these fan-favorite characters. But that's a black hole for another time, because another major film from 1997 that had become a fan favorite since its release might be getting demands from fans for a director's cut. Event Horizon might be considered among the best works of Paul W.S. Anderson has managed to give us, even though he is now known only for his game adaptations. Phantasmagorical is a term that can be associated with only a few movies, and Event Horizon fits into that perfectly with its H.P. Lovecraftian visions of hell. But while the movie managed to depict a hell in space, its production went through a hell of its own. The post-production time for the film was suddenly reduced following the announcement of James Cameron's next feature, a little-known movie that goes by the name Titanic. This reduced time meant pure hell for Paul W.S. Anderson because he had to edit and shoot stuff simultaneously and wrap the project in 4 weeks. The director created a first cut but could have left a better impression on the studio. They freaked out at the sight of it, and the absolutely hellish sequence is depicted a version of pure hell. The 2-hour cut did not please the people paying for the movie, so Anderson and his editor, Martin Hunter, decided to make significant cuts to the movie, and thus came the cut that we have seen and known all these years. But when the film was released with its unique features, we heard the soft-spoken director passionately talk about the various scenes left on the cutting room floor and how significant they are in setting the tone in the world that Anderson had initially intended. Following the release of the collector's edition Blu-ray for the film, we have seen many people involved in the project talk about the various scenes that they wish to have made into the film's final cut. Luckily, the director does a commentary on the various deleted scenes, and it only made sense that we sat down and discussed each scene in detail. It is important because, believe it or not, these deleted scenes were sent to the Transylvanian salt mines for storage. When extracted, most of their condition deteriorated and became useless. Yes, crazy stuff. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Discovery of Tooth. A scene that could have helped establish the absolute madness that happened to the people inside the Event Horizon was when Captain Miller went to explore the ship. Andrew Kevin Walker, who was one of the people who had rewritten one of the drafts of the script but went uncredited in the film, wanted to strike some fear in the minds of Miller's crew as they witnessed what Miller was looking at inside the re-emerged Event Horizon. Amongst the various things like a wrench, a watch, and other stuff floating inside the ship, one sharp thing catches his attention. Upon looking closely, it turns out to be a tooth floating around which Miller collects in one of his bags. It usually doesn't sound crazy for a tooth to be floating around on a ship with many human occupants, but this particular tooth, along with its root, had a bit of gum attached to it. So that signifies that the tooth might have been ripped out of someone with a plier. Yikes, alarming. The scene was among the few shots from Walker's script, and Anderson mentions that he regrets that it did not make it into the film's final cut. Even though all is said and done, one must remember how Paul Anderson planned to shoot this scene with a tooth in the foreground. The actress being in the background and reaching out for it adds to the viewer's intrigue in finding out what that floating item is. So we experience discovering the tooth along with Lawrence Fishburne's character, who slowly reaches out to the tooth without a clear idea of its scale.
Mission Control tried to hail the vessel. This was the only response.
Event Horizon's briefing. An essential part of most mission-oriented movies is the briefing sequence, which plays a significant role in setting up the entire mission that becomes the primary part of the narrative. Some of the central space mission films have briefing scenes that have a significant role in depicting the protagonist's importance for the mission while giving us an insight into the reason behind the mission. Remember the scene from Interstellar where we get an insight into why Cooper was necessary for the mission while setting the importance of the mission as a final attempt? It might be surprising that Event Horizon didn't have such a scene, considering it would have given us a look at the idea behind Weir, who was the least experienced in the crew, becoming a part of the salvage mission. Now, one of the deleted scenes gives us exactly this, as we see Dr. Weir being briefed by Admiral Hollis and Lyle about the Event Horizon's reemergence at the coordinates where it was last seen before it disappeared. The information completely takes Weir aback, and he responds to it with pure excitement, which plays a significant role in what follows. They had asked him to prepare a brief regarding the ship's system and hand it to the salvage crew, who would go for it, but Weir makes it clear that a briefing couldn't possibly be helpful to the crew, and he needs to be present there himself, and that's why he should be included in the crew. But the superiors comment that he is making his move to repair his reputation, to which Weir lashes out, stating that the true purpose of Event Horizon is far more than what ended up happening when the ship was lost 7 years ago. This scene, in fact, this deleted scene, convinces us for a second that there is a different reason for him to go for the Event Horizon, even though we will find a more profound reason later in the film. The creepy part follows as they play an initial transmission from the ship. The transmission is filled with inhuman voices amid static and noise, adding to the mystery of what transpired on the ship. Weir asks if the crew could have survived, and Admiral Hollis states that someone had sent that message after all. Yes, this creepy scene was in the initial plans for the film's original cut that Anderson had to let go of, and it makes us wonder how much more creepy the movie would have been initially. On another note, the original script for the film had a dialogue in this scene where Weir identifies the ship as the Event Horizon, to which Hollis remarks if the Titanic sailed into New York Harbor, I'd find it more plausible. If Cameron had planned different dates for the Titanic to show up in New York, we could have witnessed this scene in theaters. Dr. Weir becomes a spider. How many things about this movie might remind fans of horror about the 80s masterpiece Hellraiser from the mind of Clive Barker? Though there are various rumors that Barker was one of the people involved in advising during the production of Event Horizon, there is no clarity about any of them. However, Anderson himself stated that Barker was a significant influence. Once we know that, we can all agree that there are moments when we feel a lot of the depiction of the hellish elements was inspired by Barker's masterpiece Hellraiser. Even Sam Neill's character design in the end, with this now discovered body and scarred face, strongly connects with the Cenobites. But Anderson turns Weir into a spider in one of the deleted scenes where he is seen chasing Lieutenant Stark and Cooper. As the cryo tank fills with blood and releases onto Stark, she falls through a shaft with a ladder. We briefly get to see Weir's naked body drenched with blood, crawling down through the ladder in an upside-down manner, giving him a spooky depiction. That's something Stephen King would do if he had a chance to give one final spook to his audience before the end. Neill's complete investment in the character and creepy smile as he looked at them running away from him only made it more bizarre. And Anderson admits that it was one of his favorite moments that he had to let go of. The scene was inspired by The Exorcist's deleted scene, in which we see the little girl descending the stairs like a spider. Talk about influences. The reason for letting it go is the worst possible thing a studio could do to the director's plans, and it was because they wanted to reduce the amount of blood being shown in the movie. By then, we had already witnessed a sufficient amount of bloodshed, and apparently, one of the studio executives asked if the film could be turned into something that could be given a PG-13 rating. No way Anderson knew that it wasn't possible, so he did the least he could and removed the scene where Weir almost turns into a spider. The most disturbing scene from the movie. If you're asked for the most disturbing scene from the movie, there is a major chance that the nightmarish scene where we get a glimpse of what happened to the crew of the Event Horizon will make it in. Yes, the scene features the crew tearing each other apart, and in the mere seconds for which we get a glance at the video, we witness some of the most gruesome acts of violence put on screen. In the 20 seconds of the video, we witness some chap pulling out his entrails from his mouth along with other crazy stuff. But it seems that the scene was supposed to be longer and a lot more was shot than what was left on the cutting room floor. The deleted scene featured a literal orgy that was filled with moments of pure violence, along with individuals having sex with each other. One of the original scenes showed a female crew member whose mouth was held open with clamps as someone performed dentistry on her teeth by drilling screws into them. Yes, that is wild and disturbing. There was another act where someone tried to crawl away as their legs, which had been crushed by a steel bar, were left behind. Another female crew member had her breasts ripped off. Amid all this chaos, there were scenes of people involved in cannibalism and sex. According to Dave Bonnewell, the effects supervisor, adult performers were hired for this particular scene. And if you thought what was already in the logs was spooky and disturbing enough, we should be glad that this scene wasn't in its extended format. Anderson intended to show the entire scene in flashes because otherwise it wouldn't have had the impact he wanted to generate. And we do agree with him because those flashes of nightmare were sufficiently crazy. Burning Man and a Hell. The ending face-off between Weir and Miller was supposed to be completely different from what we got. Keeping with the idea of all the crew members facing their fears and paying for their sins, one of the deleted scenes featured Fishburne's character facing off against Edmund Corrick instead of Weir. Miller had to abandon Corrick during the failed mission in the Goliath vessel, and the guilt for that was something that had been haunting him from the very beginning. This scene was supposed to be the part of the narrative of Miller facing his demon, and it was included in the second cut that Anderson had prepared for the film. Flames and flesh were wrapped around Weir to depict him as the Burning Man who was supposed to be Korik. Still, it would eventually be removed when the test audiences disliked this climax. Instead, we get to witness Miller face off against Weir with his scars, which is a typical ending for the film. But that's not all. There was an extended look at a much more gory version of the visions of hell that Weir makes Miller go through. Yeah, as if hell wasn't being hell enough, because the deleted sequences showed a lot of glances at the crew members being tormented in various manners while there is fire all around him. Even though none of the footage for these scenes exist in raw form, Anderson and his team paid a lot of attention to detail to give a realistic depiction of hell based on the suffering of the crew members. The final battle between Weir and Miller was also supposed to have a lot of references to hell, with Weir extensively talking about it as he beat up Miller. Anderson refers to this as the Old Testament cut because there are apparent references to hell. In contrast, the cut we saw is slightly more vague about involving hell in the entire narrative. Even though it seems like an interesting choice to bring Edmund around the end, we prefer that we see Weir at the end, considering it has been his journey. However, we would like to see the so-called Old Testament cut at least once before making any big decisions about Anderson's plans, though he is happy about the ending that ended up showing in the final cut. Jason Isaacs' favorite scene. Jason Isaac had quite a lot of fun being a part of this movie, even though his character DJ has one of the most gruesome deaths. Earlier in the film, it is revealed that he had surgery gone wrong when he was a child, and it resulted in a scar that can be seen on his body when he is bare-chested. Ever since then, DJ has grown his biggest fear, which will haunt him throughout the film, being dissected alive. Just like the concerns of the other crew members of Event Horizon, DJ's fears will come true, and he ends up having a death sequence that is Jason Isaacs' favorite scene from the film. Surprisingly, DJ didn't have hallucinations like everyone else on the ship. Still, actions here and there show that he was under the influence of whatever force was present in the Event Horizon. Later in the film, Miller discovers DJ's body in the medical bay, dissected and hanging with a gut spilled around and a petrified look on his face. However, a lot of footage was shot for this scene that was left on the cutting room floor, and it had a lot more attention to detail that only made the death feel much more gruesome. The medical table over which his body was hung was a reflective surface, so there was a close-up of his intestines spread out on the table, with a closer look at the reflection of his face and his spliced-up body. Interestingly, the scene from the movie featured a very realistic-looking model of Jason Isaac with all his features down, which already gives the impression of the character facing a horrific death. But the deleted scene featuring the close-up actually used Jason Isaac so that the details didn't look weird and fake. However, Jason Isaac liked the model they had used in the film, which looked identical to him. He had even asked if he could take it with him, but was denied. It would probably be the effect of the Event Horizon still lingering in the actor's mind. The more frightening visions of Dr. Weir's wife. Dr. Weir had a lot more horrific renditions of his wife's vision in the original cut of the film, and these visions were more nightmares than what we've already gotten to see. One of the scenes included a more bloody and graphical reenactment of Claire's suicide that would have probably haunted us more than Dr. Weir himself. Another significant scene in the film is when Justin, the younger member of the crew, tries to attempt suicide under the influence of the hallucinations and is pulled into the gravity drive of the Event Horizon. In an attempt to commit suicide, he launches himself out of the ship's airlock, but when the alarms finally wake up, the crew realizes that he cannot be saved. Finally, Miller manages to save him as he is out of the airlock himself and Justin's put into stasis. Considering his situation for the rest of the film, one of the deleted scenes, keeping with the creepy aspect of the other deleted scenes of the film, featured Justin turning into Claire and Dr. Weir after he is rescued in a horrible condition. Scenes from the extended cut. Apart from everything we've discussed so far, many deleted sequences added more depth to the characters, making their deaths and other aspects a lot more impactful. Some deleted sequences hinted at a possible romantic relationship between Miller and Stark based on some of their interactions, but it would have added an exciting layer to the two characters. Justin's character has an enthusiasm for the Event Horizon amongst the other crew members, which adds to his persona's innocence when he gets pulled into the gravity drive of the ship, making his terrible fate a lot more consequential. Not only that, he was close friends with Cooper and considered Cooper to have a fear of losing someone close to him. Justin's attempt at suicide realized the fear, which is in keeping with the trend of concern coming true for the characters. Almost all the gruesome scenes were much longer and more detailed than what we got to see in the end, which would have had a haunting effect on the the viewers. In a recent interview, Jason Isaac clarified that some shots were deleted from the film, which would have caused some real trouble because of how controversial they were. The movie would have had a different impact entirely, while praising the efforts made by Paul W.S. Anderson in keeping with his vision. Marvel's verdict. While many directors are fighting for the director's cut of their works being released, it is sad that we will never see the same for Event Horizon. Even though Paul W.S. Anderson has had a long career with a wide variety of monster and zombie flicks with a version of jump scares, Event Horizon will remain entirely different in the league. The best things about the director's working mannerisms are present in that film, while not taken away from the horror the film was trying to depict. We can only hope that some restoration of the work emerges and the director can revisit the project with his original vision. But all hope is not dead for Event Horizon, because there is news of a TV show based on a film under development on Amazon. We can only hope that the show's creators manage to generate the horror that Event Horizon tried to bring to the viewers. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.